is on making tough decisions. I don't know how timely this is for any of you, but once upon a time there was a great book of ancient India called the Mahabharata, and I won't ask you to say that. But within this book, there's this whole epic of these different sides of the family, these ruling families. One side of the family gets estranged, and then they get sent out into the woods, and the other side of the family is in power, but they're kind of like nefarious. This is my favorite word lately. They're nefarious. They're not the best characters. And so eventually, the first side of the family comes back. I think if I'm remembering the story of the Mahabharata, it's a long story to remember. Okay? Give me some slack here. But if I'm remembering correctly, the other side of the family comes back from their 12 years of exile in the woods, and they're looking around, and it's like, oh my gosh, what has the nation of India come to? And they decide to fight. Right? They decide, this is not going to stand. These two sides are going to have to go to war. And so this picture is artist's representation of the most famous part of the Mahabharata, which is this text that they call the Bhagavad Gita, which means the song, the Gita of God. Bhagavad is a really cool word because we translate it as God because we only have one word for that kind of thing. But in ancient India, Bhagavan means one who has a share of goodness, one who has a great store of awesome qualities, I suppose. So the song of the one who has a great store of awesome qualities. And the prelude to this tale is this guy in the chariot. Well, you can see the blue guy because he's highlighted. But then there's sort of an ordinary-looking character, and this guy's name is Arjuna. And Arjuna is the great warrior. And one thing you may not know about ancient Indian martial arts is that ancient Indian martial arts all fall under a category of teachings called Dhanurved. And Dhanurved, when they say martial arts, really means the science of archery. So all of the other, in the old Vedas, all of the hand-to-hand fighting and sword fighting and stuff like that falls under the Ved, the science of Dhanur, of archery. And so Arjuna is the leader because he is this legendary archer. And this probably all has spiritual significance. If you want to read the sort of inner symbolic teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, I highly recommend Paramahansa Yogananda, famous guy from the 60s. He wrote a whole text about the inner Bhagavad Gita, saying, this whole battle is really something that goes on inside of us, perhaps. That's a different story altogether. What happens, though, in this story is that Arjuna says, okay, before we go to battle, chariot me out. He doesn't know Krishna is God yet. He doesn't know that this is the Bhagavan. This was just a neighboring king from the nation next door, and he actually won in a bet. That you can either have my armies or you can have me as a chariot driver. And Arjuna says, oh, I like you, Krishna. Come be my chariot driver, my war advisor. So he said, before the battle starts, he says, drive me out so I can survey what's going on and leading this battle. And as they drive out, Arjuna, in the middle of his chariot, breaks down. He falls to his knees. Krishna's like, what's wrong? You're the leader of the army. And he actually says words like, what's with all this unmanliness? It's pretty patriarchal. And Arjuna expresses, he's looking across the scene and he says, wait, that's my archery teacher. And that's my uncle Raj. And there's cousin, Sammy. Right? And he's looking across and he sees that this is his family, that they're about to slash and kill. And it sort of brings the reality of, I don't want to say war, because that's a big issue, defense and all, there's a lot of issues in there. But maybe even some of the wars that we have with each other, or other factions of our nation, Arjuna is having this awakening that, wait a minute, these were just demons a minute ago. And now it's cousin Sammy and my archery teacher. And in India, in ancient India, a guru, have you heard this word, guru? Right? What do you know about a guru? Can anybody just shout out? Yeah, they're a teacher, a what? Bringer of light.
Spiritual advisor.
They are a spiritual advisor. Anything else? Okay, well, one thing you may have heard is part of the whole guru cult scandal things that have happened. You heard about them in the 70s, right? Or in the 80s or the 90s, or they come around every little while. I won't name names of who's up right now. But part of the reason those become so problematic is the ancient Indian teaching is that your guru is a divine being. Once you've taken a guru, you treat them as if they were a divine being. And it's strange because this actually goes all the way down to like your archery teacher. Maybe not to the same degree as your spiritual instructor, but this is the way that sort of scholastic education was performed. It's like if somebody's teaching you something, now they are the transmitter of the divine because knowledge is a holy thing. And so your relationships with your teachers, kind of like in cultures older than our own perhaps, your relationship with your parents maybe. They're supposed to be like a holy personage to a degree. Like you would, even if your parents are wrong, you never disrespect them. Right? I'm not saying that's how we should live, by the way. This is just how it was. So it helps us to know this because we have to know the type of moral crisis that Arjuna was in when he rode out in his chariot that day. It wasn't just like, oh, that's my archery teacher. He was faced with, whoa, wait a minute, if I really commit to this action, I'm going to have to kill my guru. Because that's what war is about, right? You're not out there on the battle and going to nick his ear and teach him a lesson or something like that. You're killing cousin Sammy and your guru, right? And on the other side, these are people who have taken the noble women and forced them to disrobe in front of the people of the populace. Take off that sari, you're not a noble anymore. And to prove that, you have to strip naked in front of the entire town, right? And they're leading the outlying villages into poverty and then inflicting violence on them. So you also can't just let archery guru and cousin Sammy go about their business. So do you get the crisis here, right? Kill your guru or kill the people in the villages, and make your Aunt Matilda, have to strip down in front of the populace. Which one would you like? That's a crummy decision, wouldn't you say? Right? Like, I personally am glad I don't have to make that kind of decision today. So these are the kind of decisions, right, have you had them? Where you're darned if you do, darned if you don't. Right? So I don't want to make this a political talk by any means. But as you know, our Brexit vote is coming up. Right? And for some people, our Brexit vote is not very tough. They know like we shouldn't be responsible for all of these refugees, and like it was a bad deal to begin with, and so we should separate from the EU. But for other people, it's also not a very tough decision. Because we made these deals, we don't want to renege on them. There's going to be this whole tax thing. There's, the bonds that we've made through years of effort. Why just throw that all away? And so we should stay. But there are a number of other people who maybe think that reneging on these particular bonds is not a great idea, and that staying with the same system about which there's so much that they don't like is also a bad idea. And so if they vote either way in our upcoming Brexit vote, wait, which country am I? Anyway, if they vote either way, they feel like they're having to take a hit, like Arjuna felt in his famous battle that started this whole Bhagavad Gita teaching. Right? So in the United States, some people are also feeling this way over there across the pond, right? In the United States. Some people are very, they're very settled. Oh, I'm just going to do this. Obviously, it's this way. But there are a lot of people like the progressives in our country have a very tough decision to make. Right? And I won't even talk about what makes it so tough. But I think you've heard of an interview about it or something like that, why that's such a tough decision for a progressive-leaning person. So, what makes these decisions so tough, these so darned if you do and darned if you don't, is that there's a lot on the line, and it seems like there's no righteous choice. Have you ever experienced this? Like you come across a decision, whereas if you knew there was a righteous choice, you could just up and do that, like becoming a welcoming congregation. Right? Like that's not particularly easy. It wasn't particularly hard, but there's enough behind it that that's not really a tough decision. Right? It's just a matter of framing it appropriately, getting our understanding online, and then, become a welcoming congregation. And somebody might not like that. And that's okay. It's the right thing to do. For me, and I must remind you that as a nonprofit organization, we don't, the positions of this guy are not the positions of you get it. But for me, the Dakota Access Pipeline is a righteous issue, personally. It's, at the very least, violation of a land treaty with a sovereign nation. And you can debate that, but anyway, you can read the news on your own. So for me, that's not a tough decision. There are tough decisions involved, like if I've got $500, should I spend it on a plane ticket to North Dakota, or should I donate supplies to somebody who's already there? Right? Would it impact people more to see the minister of UUFLG physically transport to the front lines, or would it impact people more for me to take that, now $1,000, because I'd have to have supplies for my own self too, and just give it to somebody who is in the Bismarck Unitarian Universalist Church? Like, those decisions get a little tougher, but the initial decision for me, I know right where I come down, right? But that's not the kind of decision we're talking about. We're talking about darned if you do, darned if you don't. So our Brexit vote is not the first one of these that life has given us, though, is it? Have you ever had to make a tough decision in your own personal life? And please raise your hand if you have ever had to make a tough, so anybody who got away from you never had to, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I'm a recovering idealist. Sorry to say, I think it comes with age or something like that. So for the last number of years, I've just been sort of praying to whatever powers that be that I'll never actually have. There's this ethics test that they do, I think, where it's like, okay, if you have to divert the subway train, have you heard of this one? And there's like one guy over here who's, I don't know, like smoking a cigar and looks kind of ratty, and then there's a bunch of people, other people over here. Which way do you, and you are in charge of throwing the switch. Do you sacrifice the needs of the one for the needs of the many? I was like, oh God. Because, okay, well, I think I'm a needs of the many kind of guy, Spock, but then you gotta kill a dude, right? And if you don't do the thing, you're still responsible for which way it goes, right? It's a nice little moral high ground. Well, I'm just not going to flip the switch. I won't play your game. You're standing by the switch. That's a decision, right? So you get to stand by whichever way the train goes. So I've been like, please don't make those decisions fall in my lap today. And yet, as a voter or a non-voter, those decisions are in my lap every day. As a person who gets to sign petitions or not sign petitions, as a person who, as a consumer in the United States of America, or anywhere on the planet, those decisions are in my lap every day. So I'm almost a fully recovered idealist, because we have to figure out, I think, how to make these decisions so that we can make them well, and so that we can be okay with ourselves once we've made them. So, as a recovering idealist, I've become a little bit more of a follower of Sun Tzu. If you don't know Sun Tzu, he's this ancient Chinese sort of founder of the art of strategy. Right? He wrote the classic. What is this one? He says, all men can see these tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which victory is evolved. Okay, so this is kind of heavy, like, warmongering language, but maybe you, like me, are a person of the heart, and I don't know, but in my own case, being a person of the heart, I don't like to necessarily have to think about, well, what strategy am I going to take to get the most rights for everyone? Like, that seems a little too nefarious, right? Like, okay, now if I were to strategize for the next 12 years, how to not get the LGBTQ plus community repressed, which tactics with an underlying secret strategy am I going to have to take? My heart just says, like, shouldn't I just be able to believe that they don't deserve to be repressed? And if I go out and say that often enough, people's hearts will change. The great organizers of the world have found that you need to have strategy and you need to have tactics in order to make a change. And as, I don't know if you've heard, but Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., got a lot of crud slung at him. Have you heard this in your history studies? Why? Well, because he was the guy put in charge of making these. And sometimes he did a great job, sometimes he did a crummy job, and always someone was PO'd. Somebody was mad. Right? Because it's not a decision with one straight answer. So, thank goodness I'm not Reverend Dr. The Unitarians, the historical Unitarians, had two great chances to fight for civil rights as a religious organization. Some of you know this from your UU history. The first one was in the Civil War period, and the second one was in the Civil Rights period, which some of us believe is still happening, but we can call it in the 50s and 60s. Okay. And they had this interesting struggle of, do you sacrifice the privilege that you have to take a radical stand on issues that are important to you? Or do you take a less radical stand and keep the privilege that you have that allows you to speak out against it to other privileged people? And some of the Universalists thought they were just a bunch of windbags for not taking more radical action. And, who's exactly to say? But we can't just say, well, obviously you should sacrifice everything. Because what if you sacrifice the thing that allows you to be in power? These are not easy, simple decisions. And then there's Uncle Ted. Oh, you thought I forgot that Uncle Ted was coming at Thanksgiving. Uncle Ted is a hypothetical. You remember Uncle Ted from Friday night when I was giving a communication class. And the little hypothetical situation that came to my mind was, what if you have an uncle who every year comes for 2 days, feels like 8 weeks, and is kind of a jerk, and maybe let's make him, a misogynist or something like that, and special dietary considerations, but he doesn't consider anybody else, and all of this stuff. And then, do you ask Uncle Ted not to stay with you this year, like you did in '98, and then the family had trouble until 2006? Or do you grit your teeth and bear it, and for whatever reason? So Karen's, it's not a tough decision.
No.
But there might be others of you who have had an Uncle Ted or the like, which it was a tough decision. Right? There were other factors that influenced whether you could just make a boundary or whether you could just let him stay there. Make sense? Do you have these in your life? Yeah. Okay. I gotta check my phone because our clock up there is like 10 minutes slow. And you guys can't stand to listen to me for all I have to say. I can already tell you that. Okay, so I boiled this down to 5 principles that work for me and that are loosely related to the Bhagavad Gita about how to make tough decisions. Number 1, abandon all hope of being right. There are a couple of problems with being right. And the first one is that life isn't math. Okay, mathematicians, do you have a rebuttal? The mathematicians actually know. That's why some who are serious mathematicians, they just don't have any relationship. Because it's more convenient. I don't know, in studying math, I got this. I hated it in high school, and then I took a college math course, and I realized, I was like, wait, you put the numbers in the equation, and it either balances or it doesn't, and then you can go up. And it's all just so clean. And if you want to be creative, you can split it into, it's 7, but that could also be a 3 and a 4. And you could, like, wow, this is something. But people don't work that way, right? And then when you think about like the probabilities that your pipeline is going to get a leak in it, that maybe you've only got a 10% probability that your pipeline is going to have a leak in it. But that 10% is the Mississippi River. Like 10% probability is not very much until it's the stinking Mississippi River, right? And then here are people. There's only a percentage that the chemicals you use to clean the oil out of the water are going to give them cancer, which is great, except for those 12% of the population of that area who get the cancer, right? Then it gets real. So, if you have the right answer, your brain forgot this fact that people aren't math, right? There are chaos mathematicians who probably are factoring how much a butterfly's wing affects the next hurricane, but there's a lot of butterflies. I think we're going to be doing these equations for a while. We need the quantum computers to get at this stuff. And then there's the whole quantum. Okay, so abandon all hope of being right. All the fights that we get in politically, I guess it's a good time to talk about that, can only happen with the vehemence that they happen if you think you have a chance of being right, if you think you have a 100% decision, such as you have to vote for Hillary or, right? Now, you may really think that that's a good idea. I'm not arguing with you. But when you have to, because it's the only, these are things you cannot know. There are so many mysterious factors lurking in the background, right? Or you have to vote for Trump because these, and in a generally liberal congregation, that would be, oh yeah, well obviously it sounds right to the person saying it, but it's not. But if I talk about your candidate, Jill Stein, Gary Johnson, whoever you want, we like these positions because it's a little bit comfortable to be right. Okay, so we all know this. The real problem with being right and making tough decisions, though, is that your brain is a search engine. Your brain is a search engine. So when you task it brain, yes, Reverend Faction, please search for the right decision. Endless loop, right? Turn it off and turn it on again, right? And people have their various ways of turning it off and turning it on again. So when you're looking for the 100% right decision, you're looking for something that you can't ever find, but your brain doesn't know that because it's a search engine, right? So it just keeps on searching. We get tunnel vision that limits our ability to make a decent decision by our trying hard to make the right decision. Right? So that's all I have to say. I'm highly censoring myself to not make a political statement up here. So, well, let's move on because the clock's ticking anyway. Okay, so number one, nothing's 100% right. Number two is why? Because everything is multifactorial. Multifactorial. So we could think about, okay, I'm back in hypothetical. We could think about a Trump presidency. Some of you, oh God, there are probably at least two of you who, if I said the Hillary presidency, you have that same reaction. So don't feel like you're safe. When we think about that, though, one problem is the dialogue that I've heard, at least, on the liberal media, is that it all sounds like we think of the main factor is the Trump. That's the factor in a Trump presidency. But for now, we precariously do have this thing called checks and balances in the United States. Like, unless you believe it's an entire conspiracy, that doesn't really matter. When you think about a Hillary presidency, we think that that is the factor. That there aren't necessarily a bunch of different propositions on the California ballot, for example, that could influence it. That there aren't marches to take on Washington. That there aren't bank accounts to transfer to credit unions. That there aren't thousands of different factors that can be considered when we think about our decision. So when we know that there isn't 100% right, and we know that there are multiple factors, you can start to balance your decision with decisions about the other factors. Decisions about the other factors. So with Uncle Ted, for example, there are a lot of things you can do for the Uncle Ted situation, aside from just kick him out and just let him stay. Right? You could build an addition onto your house. You could set him up in a swanky hotel room if you have that means. You could stay with a friend. You could get Uncle Ted drug and alcohol treatment. There are all of these things that can be done when we get out of the notion that our minds love, this localism notion, that when I do the one thing, when I press the one button, when I cross that one line, my decision-making process is done and irrevocable. For the next 4 years, or however long Brexit lasts, you're going to have to live with the results of that one single decision that changes everything. And the factors are actually quite multiple. Okay, you have 3 minds. So next time somebody says to you, oh, I'm just of 2 minds about that. No, you're of 3. And it's a great way to start an argument. You're going to say it with a no. So, depending on the cultural camp that you like to live in, you may emphasize one of these minds over the other. If you're a card-carrying Unitarian Universalist, you might have been trained to that this one is very important, and then this one is also important, right? Because we think, we digest, we have to chew it up, we have to look at all the options, we have to think about it logically. If you live in Santa Cruz near me, you might think that this one is the most important. Get out of your head. You're overthinking this. Just if we all settled into our heart, we all love the same things. We're all humans. All lives matter. Just get into your heart, and you'll make the right decision. You don't have to listen to all of these different points of view. Or you could just go with your gut. Decisions your feelings, you're never going to tease out all your feelings. The information, there's no right answers. Reverend Fajin said so. So just like whatever comes to you, just go for it. Go with your gut. If we were to take advantage of all 3 of these minds, though, we might recognize that there's a different type of power ensconced in each. Our gut. Okay, does anybody believe in intuition? Okay. Has anybody ever experienced intuition, whether you believe in it or not? Very good. And if you want to read some research on it, you can read the book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, I believe it is. He talks about research on intuition. So you have stuff in your gut. You have actually gray matter in your gut, and serotonin, fiddling with your guts. And one of the stories in that book is, I believe it was an Air Force guy watching the radar, and consciously he didn't see the little blip which went boop and then went away. But all day long he had this weird feeling, like they did on Star Wars or something like that. And his weird feeling caused him to double check and find these creepy, nefarious characters crossing over a border. So the gut does good. If you were to use just your intellect, you might go, well, these things show up random blips all the time, whatever. And you could get loaded up. So trust your gut, right? Your heart is where our values come from. The Terminator, right? Or Blade Runner, or one of these, evil robot thing. Okay, don't be that. That's why they made those movies, is so you don't be that. That's the one who lives up here all the time. So if we were to get all 3 of these online, we have all of the resources of our being available to make a decision. Last but not least, this guy says, you had good intentions. Let's find you a nice job paving roads. So I hear there's a road somewhere that's paved with good intentions. I forget exactly where it goes, but I figure I'll just keep having good intentions and I'll find out. So this principle, there are two here. One is go with your best intention, and the other is be prepared to mourn. Okay? So when I say go with your best intention, notice I said best intention, not good intentions. Okay? And this, I'm stealing from this guy, Don Miguel Ruiz, who has this system called the 4 Agreements. And one of the 4 agreements is always do your best. And I think it's based on this fact that we can't be 100% right. But we can align these 3 minds. We can analyze everything that's available to us. We can embrace multiplicity. And then we do our doggone best. Right? We go with our values to the best that we can. And one of the things that brings up resistance to that is that many of us have been taught that if you get it wrong, it's the end of the world. We have been trained. You can't cry outwardly over spilled milk, but if you spill that milk, you should know that you're a really, really bad person. This is a way to freeze in your assets, to being locked in fight or flight, to where these 3 minds don't work properly, and we can't make the tough decisions that life will continuously throw at us. Basically, like every time you're at a cash register, every time you talk to another person. So we've got to go with our best because that's what we've got. And we've got to be prepared to do it wrong. When the heart softens in mourning, the ability to just screw up royally, knowing that we've done our best, we unlock the inner resources that let us see our world clearly and give us a type of strength and dignity to go forward and make the next tough decision that will come along in 2 or 4 years or maybe next week. At the end of the story, Krishna convinces Arjuna to fight. But he convinces him to fight with a whole different set of assumptions than he had made when he initially made the decision to fight. I hope today that you can radically question your own assumptions and find that source